Welcome to the Scott My Show, a podcast where we talk about bodybuilding, health improvement, and physique enhancement. Before we get into the show, I just wanted to let you know that I do offer one-on-one coaching. If you're interested in working with me, I offer personalized coaching where I can help you reach your goals, whether it be fat loss, building muscle, improving your health, or all the above. I provide tailored nutrition, training, and supplementation advice, one or all of those together, with 24/7 ongoing support to help you every step of the way with any questions you may have. If you're interested, you can DM me on Instagram, click the link in my profile to fill out a form, or ask any questions you may have. Also, we can hop on a free consult call where we can go over your goals, answer questions, and discuss what it would look like to work together. The show is brought to you by Element Electrolytes, and for a limited time, the Element Chocolate Medley is available with 3 flavors: chocolate mint, chocolate chai, and chocolate raspberry. They all go really well in any hot beverage, whether it's coffee, tea, or just a glass of hot water. And I personally love Element Electrolytes, and my wife does too. We've been using them for years. They're a great way to help boost performance, to help you get in the proper amount of electrolytes for a day, and help regulate brain health, physical health. Uh, Salt is important for a lot of things, and just drinking plain water doesn't get you the electrolytes you need. So check out Element in the description, or you can go to drinkelement.com/Scott Mize, and there you'll be able to get a free sample pack when you use my link and help support the show. Thank you. This is a quick disclaimer before we start the show. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing said here should be taken as medical advice, and please consult with your physician before making any changes to your diet, exercise regime, or medications. Thank you, and on to the show. All right, this is part 2 with Ryan Root. Please check out part 1. That'll definitely help you understand some of the stuff we're talking about. But Ryan founded hormonesforme.com, an online wellness and hormone replacement therapy clinic that's helped thousands of customers and clients. And he has a lot of research-backed clinical experience. And in a past life, Ryan operated and owned one of the largest UGLs in the world. And so we're continuing that story, and then we're going to talk about his experience owning a clinic now. So Ryan, take it away. You were just talking a little bit before we hit record about some of the psychology behind the operation and some of the controversy around jail time and dealers and some of the things you learned.
Yeah. So I think that this is an interesting take. I know, Scott, I've watched some of your content. You and I both like to get a little philosophical and go deeper into things, which makes your content really interesting. You ask great questions,
Thank you.
So instead of just like looking at this at a superficial facile level of how much money did you make and how did your operation run and all of this, I like to really explore some of the deeper issues, like the psychology behind, like, what does it take? What is the mindset? What's the mentality of someone who runs one of these operations? And I was really able to understand, um, my whole life I've been interested in neurobiology, and I have studied it. And then in prison, I was actually able to read a couple of books. When I was in prison, I actually took that time to read voraciously, and I actually wrote the business plan for my current business while I was in there. I guess I used the time very wisely. So when I was in prison, I actually read some more books on neurobiology, and then it kind of like a moment of clarity, like it just clicked, like how human behavior and a lot of the reasons. So like, what's the psychology of someone who runs one of these businesses? Again, when I was in prison, one of the things I learned is I was in prison with a lot of big time drug dealers. Like a lot of I was just in camps, but a lot of these bigger time drug dealers were nonviolent. Over half the prison population is nonviolent drug dealers. So, and what I learned is that a lot of these guys are not bad people.
Yeah.
Certainly are some people who go to prison who need to be there. but most of the prison population are not bad people. Did not have bad intentions. Um, and a large percentage of the prison population doesn't need to be there. And so when we talk about prison reform, unfortunately, like the idea that a lot of the government just has with prison reform is just stop putting people in prison. And again, some people need to be there. Like the problems with New York and California, where they're just like they've just, you have violent criminals who they just kind of let go. That's not prison reform. That's not what we're talking about when we say we need prison reform. It isn't about just not putting people who need to be there in prison. um it's about, that's a whole different topic, but what you start to learn is that they're not bad people. And so a lot of people like to just, when somebody is a big time drug dealer, or when they run one of these operations, the idea, people like to just wrap it up in this neat explainable box, right? And just say, okay, well, they're just greedy, right? They just wanted the money, they're greedy. It's easy to explain. We wrap it up in this box, throw it away, and there you go. And it's it's certainly not that simple, and it doesn't have to do with greed. So in order to explain this, let me explain. I want to do a quick neurobiology lesson, and I started to go over this a little bit earlier, but um so so what I came to understand is that um this concept is pervasive, and it's a large part of the basis of all of human behavior, and it's really not well known, right? Although we talk about, so let's talk about the chemicals: dopamine, the dose response, right? Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. These neurotransmitters are our reward pathways, and they're also necessary for neurotransmitters in our brain, but they also happen to be, the expression of these happen to be a large part of human behavior, right? So we evolved mechanisms to produce these chemicals: dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. Whenever we do something that allows us ourselves to survive, or improves the survival of our species. We evolved to be a social creatures. When we help each other survive, our species as a whole survives better. So we evolved these mechanisms to produce a reward chemical when we do something to improve the chance of survival. So, and it's simple. It can be simple things, and it can get more complex, such as eating. Right, eating helps us survive, so we get a dose response from that. This is why, and so another thing to understand is that these chemicals are addictive. They're supposed to be addictive, right? We're supposed to, when we do an action, perform an action that allows us to survive, or the survival of our species, we're supposed to get a um, neurotransmitter reward that tells us keep doing that behavior, right? And so we're supposed to be addicted to these chemicals. You're supposed to say, I want more of those chemicals. Let me do the actions, perform the actions that help me and our species survive, so that I can keep getting these chemicals. So things such as eating produces these chemicals. Exercise, sex obviously helps our species survive. So sex is a big producer of these neurotransmitters. But it gets a little bit more like, again, we evolved to be social creatures. So even little things such as human connection, when you connect with a human, when you help a human, there's a massive dose response from both the person who is helping and the person who gets help. And this helps form your connection with the people, and all connections. That's why helping people is a reinforcing dose response, right?
Yeah.
It starts a cycle. When you help somebody, it makes them feel good about you. When you get the respect and admiration, when you even sense that from subtle social cues, you get a dose response. When you get the social cues that somebody respects or admires you, when people smile at you, when you get a positive response from somebody, all dose affirming um, actions, right? So all these social cues, when you help somebody, it makes them have positive social cues towards you, which keep giving you dose responses, and in the future it makes them want to help you back too, which also, again, dose response. So you're getting all these feel good chemicals when you help people survive, we're social, we were evolved to be social creatures, right? So, and
Just
that,
just to add on to that,
yeah.
Ryan, actually in college I studied kind of the psychology of business,
Mhm,
and I actually conducted original research on reciprocity styles and that like effect of pro-social giving on happiness and well-being.
mhm,
And there's
mhm.
this famous study from Harvard where they've recreated in a lot of different ways, but the foundational study is they gave people like $20 or $5 to either spend on themselves or spend on someone else. They were
Mhm.
randomized into those two groups. And the
Yeah.
people who spent money on others were made happier by
Mhm.
doing that than spending
Yeah.
on themselves.
Yeah.
And that's like pretty universal across
Mhm.
populations, different backgrounds, different situations. Like people are generally made as happy or happier
Yeah.
by spending on other people than spending on themselves. So yeah,
Yeah.
just goes along
Super
with what you
interesting.
said.
Super interesting. So, um, yeah. So what when you come to understand this, right, and the evolutionary mechanism that developed us into social creatures, you start to realize that most of our dose response comes from other people, right? And so, the funny thing is, if you look this up, like on the internet, if you say, okay, how do I increase my dopamine, or how do I increase my serotonin, it will give you like foods to eat, right, or something, and which is stupid. It's actions, right? All the, like, oxytocin, love, connection, touching other humans. um your actions determine how much dose response you're going to get, and you can start to understand. And I use the word manipulate, but not negatively. Like, you can manipulate situations to get more dose responses, right, but not in a negative way. Like, you
Yeah.
can one of the best dose responses is compliments, right? You can compliment somebody, get them feeling good about you, and then there's a reciprocity. Like, you feel good because you made that person feel good, right?
Yeah.
Like, connecting with people. Hey, if you need the job and you're interviewing with a boss, like, connect with them. Oh, you like the Jets. I like the Jets too. Just connections, right?
Yeah.
um Little things, and these can, you start to realize that other people, the dose responses that you get from social connection is actually the biggest dose responses. And just like you said, when you help somebody else, it's a reinforcing positive dose response that continues to pile up. And just helping yourself will give you a quick dose response, but it's not a positive reinforcing cycle like
Yeah.
helping somebody else. So yeah, you start to realize that your happiness depends on helping and other people, right? And once you understand this process, it's actually it's easy to it's a lot easier to understand and see the actions you need to perform in order to get these feel good chemicals. It's
Yeah.
really interesting. It's super fascinating. And
Yeah.
most of our behavior is dependent on these chemicals. So let's go into to explain this part too, because I think this is interesting and important. So these chemicals, right, that we're supposed to be addicted to, we were supposed to be. When you get one of these chemicals, your body says perform the action, and it's actually dopamine that makes you narrows your focus to go perform the action to get these chemicals again, right? So dopamine is actually the action motivation motivator. So when your body wants another dose response, it produces dopamine, which also is a feel good chemical, but it narrows your focus. Let's go perform the action to get the other neurotransmitter that I want, even if it's more dopamine, right? Dopamine chases dopamine. Um, but we're supposed to be addicted to these. So this is the concept behind drugs, right? Or recreational drugs, anyways. Drugs mimic these neurotransmitters. So opiates, heroin, whatever, oxycontin, Vicodin mimic endorphins, right? Um, Alcohol gives you a huge uptake of all of them, like a combination of all of them, especially dopamine, but also oxytocin, serotonin. Cocaine is a huge uptake of serotonin. So drugs just mimic, they either directly mimic these chemicals, or like alcohol just makes your body, alcohol is actually a poison, and your body produces a lot of these chemicals um, to avoid the toxicity, right? So you produce a bunch of endorphins and dopamine. Cutters, like people who cut. like sometimes some people who cut, when you cut, you get a huge uptake of endorphins, right? So people who cut, who are addicted to cutting, actually it's because they get these endorphins. So like, you know, that's this is so the way we evolved is you get these um addictive neurotransmitters, which are supposed to be addictive for doing something positive, right? And you keep doing that. And the problem with drugs is that they mimic these chemicals. So when you take these chemicals, your body says, do the action that gave me those chemicals. And what's that action? Just doing the drugs, right? So that's why drugs are a negative reinforcing cycle. It's this, it gets in the way of this evolutionary mechanism of actually doing something positive. Um, anyways, so now let's take this, what we've learned, and apply it to what happens in my situation or in other drug dealers. Like what pushes somebody on, right? Um, as I said earlier, I used to get emails every day, and you would have, and like I was on eroids as well, and there's people, you have something, the people respect you, they admire you because you have something, you're doing something that I could give them what they needed. You know, what really does help them. Testosterone is very important. It also helps them look good, feel better, everything, and I could give it to them at high quality at a good price. So I almost had this sycophantish following, right, where people would, you know, almost, you know, in a sense, praise you for everything that you're giving them. And this sycophantish behavior like starts to give you a lot of this dose response, right? And people thanking me every day, it gives you this dose response. You become addicted to that. You're supposed to be addicted to helping people, right? So when I said that, I got scared the one time. I had $100,000 in my hand. I was like, this has got too big. I got scared. I'm going to get caught. And what drove me on? Thinking about not helping people anymore, right? Thinking about losing that dose response. That's what drove me on. That's passion. We have words that are other words for dose responses, such as motivation. That's another word for dopamine uptake, right? Passion. That's another word for dose response, like a combination of different of these chemicals. You know, motivation, passion, or drive. That's another word for just for dopamine, a dopamine uptake, right? So what gave me passion in driving out was helping people and seeing that and having all these people kind of let me know that I was helping them. So as an interesting side note, like I said earlier, like one of the things, mistakes I noticed that other sources doing is when, let me also explain this. So when you have too much of a dose response, when it's too high, you become what we call manic, right? So, and interestingly enough, this is what bipolar disorder is, right? Is like your mechanisms to control the dose level, right? Or dopamine, or all of them, kind of the level. You have mechanisms to control the amount that you have. When that's broken, it can go too high and you become what we call manic. Bipolar disorder is when people are manic depressive, right? So you know, your body tries to regulate your dose response in this area. When it goes too high, you're manic, right? You start to think you're godlike. You start to think everybody else around you doesn't know what they're talking about and that everybody should listen to you, right? You start to kind of think that you're this high, you know, like the typical prince, the bratty prince behavior, or a king behavior, right? Who just needs everything exactly the way he wants it, right? That's a manic person in a manic state because they have too many sycophants, right? And their dose response is too high. So manic bipolar disorder, manic depressive, and then if it goes too low, then you're depressed and you have all these depressed feelings. So interestingly enough, when you are addicted to drugs, you actually you're making yourself bipolar, right? You're taking the drugs, you're becoming manic, and then your body's not producing the dose chemicals anymore naturally, so you go down into depressive. So you're actually like making yourself bipolar by taking, by, you know, drugs. Um, so some of these other steroid dealers I noticed on the sites were becoming manic, and I could see it in their behavior towards their clients, right? They would, if anybody suggested that they were doing something wrong, they would become incredibly defensive and you know, start putting people down, almost like a person in a manic state, right? And uh and I would see other sources doing that. And then at the time I would vowed like I would, that's one thing I'm not going to do. Like when, is it's always about customer service, is always about respecting your clients. And so, so that was just a little side note to see, I could start to see this manic behavior in some of these people. And I made it a point not to do that. Like it was always about respectful. It was always about good customer service. So um what so when we talk about, even whether it was me or whether it's even a cocaine dealer, right? Like, and a lot of people will say, yeah, but cocaine hurts people. Well, you're still getting people who are respecting you and admire you because you have what they want, right? The evolutionary mechanism of the dose response doesn't take into account long-term effects of all you're getting. That dose response is the immediate effect of people want the cocaine, they're coming to you, they're respecting you, they're admiring you, you're helping them, even though in the long term it's not help,
Yeah.
like allowing people to be addicted to cocaine. But your brain doesn't, evolution didn't allow us to make that distinction. It's those instantaneous social cues, right, that give us this response. So even like a cocaine dealer or a heroin dealer or something, they're still getting that you have what the people want, the people are respecting you and admiring you, they're getting all the social cues to have this dose response. So when people say, oh, you just got greedy, you just wanted the money, that is such a facile understanding of what actually the complex neurobiochemical reactions that are actually occurring here. And so this idea of helping people is what drives the passion. That's what drives you on. I mean, there was points like, I mean, shit. I had I had so, there was points when I had so much money coming in, I couldn't collect it all. Like one of my biggest problems at one point was collecting all the money. Right? I had all these things. I had 5 houses. I had a penthouse overlooking Manhattan. A brand new great car. Um, the That's not what kept driving me on. There was a point when I knew this was going to go down. Like there's a point when I was like, I can't keep this up. Like this is ridiculous. Like
Yeah.
there's like it's it just gets too loud and too much. And like there's a point when but I couldn't stop.
Yeah.
There's no way I could stop. It was like it. It is. But it's not. Again, it's not the money. It's not the wealth. It's the purpose, right? Like I had this purpose. People needed me, and that's what drives you on. That's what, um, So, and it's always been about helping people.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. I think that's so cool that you explained it that way, because a lot of people, I'm sure, have that snap reaction to
Yeah.
put you and others in that box. And it's interesting, not exactly the same, but the last company I worked for was actually a cannabis company. And they worked with this nonprofit called the Last Prisoner Project.
Mm,
And there were, over the last 20 years, there's been 16 million people arrested for marijuana possession.
mm.
And some of these people, it's like some black kid who went to prison for 15 years
I,
just for having some weed on him. And
I
it's now
wasn't.
legal. It's a legal drug, you
I,
know?
w- I was in prison with some guy, nonviolent. Because like I went in there and I knew something was wrong with my case. So I started studying the law, and then I became what's known as in the prisons as the jailhouse lawyer, somebody who just takes an interest in the law. And I really started to understood it. And I spent hours and hours a day. And then I became so good at the law in regards to my own case, because I knew something was wrong and there was something wrong with my case. Um, that I started helping other people because I I understood it, and other people had problems. They needed motions filed to the court. They needed habeas corpus petitions written because there's just something dramatically wrong with the case. And that's another thing you find. This is what we mean by prison reform. 80%, maybe even 90% of the people have something wrong with their case. Like it's complex. Like the legal system, it's complex. The lawyers don't care. The judges don't care. And then the district attorney, all he's trying to do is get you as long of a sentence as he can. And your defense counsel doesn't care. The judge doesn't care about your sentence. So all these mistakes are made, and most people, there's people put in for 10 years longer than they should have been,
Wow.
just on not really understanding the details of the case,
Yeah.
and just, charging people. So when I go in there and help, I helped one guy write a motion, um, for early release. He did 22 years non-violent, no gun, no nothing, for marijuana possession. And uh, while it was becoming legal in all these freaking states, we were in there, and every state's starting to legalize it.
Yeah.
And they're talking
Crazy.
about it becoming federally legal in a few years. And this guy's
Yeah.
still rotting in prison
Yeah. It's
from this
crazy.
marijuana, 22 years. I was like, you gotta
Yeah.
be kidding me.
Yeah. It's
There's a
awful.
ton of people in prison like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's insane. The war on drugs, and this spans across like administrations. It doesn't matter if you're a
Yeah.
Democrat or Republican. It's
Yeah.
$47 billion a year the government
Yeah.
spends on the war on drugs. It's like
It's
it's crazy.
it's one of the worst things, and it's all a platform, right? What people understand is that it's an election tactic. It's the age-old election tactic, right? Make the people afraid of something and then offer a solution to it,
Yeah,
right? So they go, ooh, boogity boo, here's this scary drugs. If you elect us, we'll do something about this, right? And what did they do? They it was in the late 80s. It started with just say no to drugs, the Reagan administration, right? And then it went on to Clinton and the Bushes, and they just stayed on this campaign of the war on drugs, and it just put so many. The prison population went from, like, the federal prison population went from 20,000 to over 200,000 in the span of just a few years
wow.
from the war on drugs. It was absolutely insane.
Yeah, crazy, crazy. So yeah, I'd love to wrap up the story,
Yeah.
and then I'd like to spend some time on talking about your clinic and experience you have with clients there.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry for the side note.
No,
I think
no,
that's an
it's super
interesting,
interesting. I
yeah,
find this stuff so
interesting,
interesting.
yeah, an interesting way to look at it. So, okay, let's go to so yeah, I'll just go to the end of the story, and then we can talk about a cool few interesting things that happened, and then yeah, we can talk about the business today. Um, so again, I'm living in New York. I lived in New York, the greater New York City area. I lived in the Jersey side, right in the Hudson. Like, I moved out here over time. Like, I started buying houses and renting them, and I had some real estate, and I moved to the Jersey side, right on the Hudson River, but it's the greater New York City area.
Yeah.
And I moved into a penthouse up there overlooking Manhattan. It was gorgeous, $9,000 a month. It was gorgeous, and this was back when places were cheaper.
Yeah.
That place now would probably be 15,000 a month.
Yeah.
But it was gorgeous. So I'm there. I had just gone to Vegas. I used to do these elaborate vacations in Vegas. Like, we'd go there and I would just blow like 60 grand a vacation. And I didn't gamble. It was all on booze. Like, I'd buy VIP tables, right? I go on these elaborate vacations, go to the top restaurants, and go to um I would get somebody to plan the vacation. Right. So they would get me a, a pool party, a VIP section at a pool party during the day, and a VIP section at a club at night. And like every day we were there, we would do that. And I had this little entourage of friends that I'd bring along with me. Um, it was a great time. So I had just gotten back from Vegas, and I was still really hungover. This is back when I used to drink. I haven't actually drank since then. Uh, I've been completely sober since then. This was September 15th. No, September 20th, 2015. Yeah, that
Wow.
was I think that's when I came back from Vegas. I got indicted on the 23rd, but I got back from Vegas there. So I think the 23rd, September 2015, September 23rd. Um, yeah, so it's that date, and I was still really hungover. So, but at 5:30 in the morning, I hear this pounding on the door, and my dogs start barking, and my girlfriend actually got up, and I'm like, did I really hear that? Like, I was still like a little groggy. I'm like, did I really just hear that? And then it happens again. So I'm like, what the hell? And I'm actually getting mad. I'm like, who the hell is banging on my door at 5:30 in the morning? My girlfriend gets up and she goes out there, and I'm like sitting around and I'm putting a shirt on, and the dogs are still barking, and I'm like getting mad. So I put a shirt on and I walk out there, and my girlfriend's coming back from the door, and she goes, I can't see, they're blocking the peephole. I think they pounded on the door again. So now I'm like, I'm angry. I'm like, I'm gonna go tell this person, you don't sit here and pound on my door at 5:30 in the morning. And so I'm like mad, and I walk up to the door and I just fling it open like that. And then I look, and there's a line of cops with guns pointed at my head with bulletproof vests on. And they all have guns pointed at my head. And I just like, I mean, I don't know. I knew instantly what the hell was going on. But I remember there was, so the person who led the investigation was the remember when I was saying um when I had those boxes that leaked, they got seized and then they sent the DEA over.
Yeah.
Well, there was a post I don't know, a post office general guy there who's a federal employee that is in kind of charge of the security of the post office and the mail, right?
Huh.
And he was there, and he's the one who saw it, and he was the one who pushed for the feds to pick this up. And it was like a little, he just got this hard on for me and for this case, and he followed it the entire way, and he made sure he was the one to come to the door. Um, and like from what I started to understand, and he was all proud of himself too. From what I started to understand, like if he had dropped it, it probably wouldn't have gone to the feds. But he pushed it.
That's crazy.
So this guy was there in the front, and he just like put his hand on the door when I opened it, and it was just like, okay, and the okay was for two things. One was like, okay, we got you, I got you, and the other was for, because he was the first one to be able to see. The other okay was for all the people behind him, like, go ahead and put your guns down. Like, I don't see a gun or anything, because I'm not violent, I don't have any guns or anything. So he was just like, okay, everybody, and okay to me, we got you. So they just came in, they put my girlfriend and I in handcuffs, they put us in the seat. They were like, do you know why we're here? Like, I have no idea. I knew exactly why they were there. The one thing that actually, for some reason, gave me a little bit of solace at that moment is all the cops were totally impressed with the place I had. They were like, this is a beautiful place. They're like floor to ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. They were like looking out the windows going, this is gorgeous. This is a really nice place. I'm like, thanks. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to live here much longer anymore. Dude. But that was it.
Wow.
And that was it. I actually didn't go to prison then. This was another like negative aspect of the way the system works is like I didn't go to prison then. They took me in, and I got released on bail. And when you're non-violent, though, it's not much. It's like you don't even have to put up any money. You just, like, somebody has to just pledge that they'll put up money if you do run, right? So it's not even so but it took 2 years for all the proceedings. So I had this over my head, I had hanging over me, I'm going to prison at some point. I don't know how long, I don't know what's going on.
Oh, that's awful.
And it's just the worst feeling. Like if I would have just gone right into prison right then I would have been out 2 years earlier, right?
Yeah.
But you wait 2 years, and then you got to do, and I ended up getting sentenced to 6.5 years. I only did like 4.5 of that for good time, and I did a residential drug abuse program that got me a year off my sentence. But I, you start your sentence 2 years later, and that the time that you're out is just garbage time because you're depressed, you feel like shit.
Yeah.
You
Can't really like start.
You can't do anything because you're going to prison. So it's
Yeah.
just like it was awful. I mean, in retrospect, I should have just gone right in.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah. So what was your journey like afterward, and what brought you to start a hormone replacement clinic? You said,
well, interestingly enough, one
planning.
side note, when I was out though, I did start another company because when I started to form a succession plan when I towards the end, um where I was trying to start this real estate thing so I could eventually, I was like, maybe I can just quit doing the illegal thing and then just turn it into this legal business. So I started the real estate thing. And then I also started, although it wasn't operational yet, but I started the beginnings of a supplement company and called mycustomprotein.com. And I kept on with the supplement company when I was indebted. I actually almost made it on Shark Tank. And I got in the Forbes magazine for being one of the guys just barely missing the cut for the actual show.
Oh, wow.
But so I had this protein company called mycustomprotein.com that where we actually made the protein depending on how you want it, right? So it's like we had the types of protein you want, the whatever additives you want, and we had like, scientifically explained what each thing will do for you, and if you're looking for this is probably what you should take. But it was more about customizing the fit of a supplement to the person instead of you going and fitting something that's already on the shelf, right? But I don't know. It was a good idea, but then I had to go to prison. um,
So what from your experience running the operation, I think I can guess based on what you talked about with kind of helping people, but what made you want to or hesitant to start a hormone replacement clinic?
yeah, so it was interesting. So, like I said, I used the time in prison wisely, and most people don't do that. And I'm not even saying it's a knock on the people because honestly, they don't, there's not opportunity, there's not incentive to do anything. That's one of the problems in prison too, is like, what have we done with people, right? One of the reasons people commit these crimes is because they don't know what else to do, right?
Mm.
Like I said, I was in prison with a lot of these drug dealers, great people, like smart guys too, but they just don't have the formal education. A lot of them have language skills, or there's something wrong where they're not able to make it legitimately in society. Like a lot of it has to do with education. Um, and so if you don't know what else to do, then that kind of gives you incentive. If you have nothing to lose, you're going to be poor on the street, or you can be wealthy and risk going to prison, right? It's like you don't know what else to do. And then so a lot of the reason for that. Now, when we go into prison, I don't care how much they say, oh, well, we have these programs to teach people skills. They're bullshit. They're all bullshit. There's no incentives to really go and do better and educate yourself. And you have to understand that a lot of these guys don't understand the value of education because none of their families were educated. The people they looked up to were the other drug dealers, in the when they were growing up. Nobody, like, you and I grew up in a type of family where your parents valued education. Everybody around you was like, yes, you get up, you go to college, here's the value of an education. It's inculcated you every day. When you grow up in the hood or in the streets, you're not inculcated with that. Everybody's like, college is worthless, it's bullshit, like, and it's too hard, and you're going to fail out of it anyway. So you just got to live by the rules of the streets, and the people they look up to are the other drug dealers, right? So it's like, as much as you as like, people in a certain situation can value education and understand it, if you don't ever have never seen anybody benefit from the education, then you're not going to put value in it yourself. So there's no, and then when you get in there, right, all we're doing is locking you up for the X amount of years, and this means that you're out of society. You don't have any time to produce. You're actually getting hamstrung by being taken out of society now.
Yeah.
And then when you're done with your sentence, they just boot you back out the door and say, okay, now go make something of yourself, right? It's all bullshit. Like incentivize education, incentivize learning a skill set. And as much as they want to say there's programs to do that, they're all bullshit. There's not really programs to do that. That would be a decent system, right? Incentivize people by saying, if you learn this skill set, we'll drastically reduce your sentence so you can get out there and actually contribute to society.
Yeah.
But I forget. I went off on a tangent. Sorry about that.
Yeah. My my
What
question,
were we
like what
ah,
from your past experience made you
yeah.
either emboldened to or hesitant to start?
Yeah. So yeah, sorry about that. So I used my time wisely when I was in there. So I did a lot of research, and honestly, like at first I had these other ideas of different businesses I wanted to start. And then that's another thing. Like as a felon, you're not going to get a good job. So really one of your only things you can do is to become an entrepreneur, right? Like otherwise it's really tough to get a job for. I mean, I'm discriminated still for having a felony.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um so you almost have to be an entrepreneur. So I was trying to think of these other things I could do, and I just didn't think about doing this legitimately. I didn't know it was really an option, and well, but I sort of did because I had seen it before. And one of the things I remember being printed back in 2015 or so was that you have these ex felons who were starting these MSO, these TRT clinics, and I was like, huh, that's interesting. So I knew it was a thing that could actually happen. And I didn't think about it. So I started talking about, and to be honest with you, like I'm not a good salesman. I'm not a very good salesman. I've never been able to sell things, but I can sell hormones
Yeah.
because I believe in them. I'm passionate about them, and they're actually are very effective. So when I thought about, well, what's the perfect, like, what would I be passionate about? It's hormones. It's testosterone. Like at first I just didn't see the connection until I was in these white collar prisons, so there was a lot of really business savvy people there who, some of the people there on some fraud charges, some of them bullshit, but there's a lot of really savvy entrepreneurs, like multi-million dollar or even a few billionaires in there. And so I would talk to them, I would kind of pitch ideas, and one of them one time was looking at my ideas and was like, well, what'd you do to when they kind of heard what I did to get in there, and they're like, well, can you sell testosterone legally? And I was like, well, yeah, I guess there's a way to do it if you do this and if you did that. Then they're like, why don't you do that? And I didn't think of it. I was like, it hit me as soon as the person said that. I was like, oh my God, this is what I have to do, right?
Yeah.
I like there is a pathway there, and I just got to figure it out and make it happen, right? And that's another thing. Like one of the things I learned from starting this empire was how to just make things happen, right? It's like you got to get in there, you got to grind, you got to put your head down, and when there's a goal, you just take it step by step and just make that shit happen. Like there's no I can't, there's no I don't, this isn't gonna work, there's none of that. It's just make shit happen. So like I had that mantra, make it happen. Like I actually started saying that to everybody. It doesn't matter what it takes, make it happen. And so, like again, I was like, okay, let's freaking start on this road to doing this legitimately and legally. So I learned, like, so the for anybody interested, the way that I can do this legally is the TRT clinics are set up as a dual corporate structure, right? So it's what's called a MSO, a management services organization, which partners with an actual medical clinic, right? So I own the management services organization. I actually don't have anything to do with the medical clinic. But my management services organization, we do all the administrative functions of a medical clinic. We even do the marketing and advertising and everything. And then we have what's called a uh, MSA. Now I'm going to brain fart. Services agreement.
Mutual services agreement, managed services agreement.
Yeah, management services agreement. Thank you.
Yeah.
with a medical clinic, and so in there, I am allowed um to propose treatment options due to just because I've been doing this for a long time. But the clinical, the actual clinical, the prescriptions, the clinical are up to the provider. Like obviously they have the last say. I don't have any say in the final. I mean, I'm allowed to say, hey, due to my experience, this is what I would suggest.
Yeah.
It's on them. They have full control and authority over the final, whatever the prescription may be. So one of the things that I do is I just search for providers who share my vision, right, on how to do this, right? So, and when we align with somebody, that's when we talk about forming a partnership. So that's how you're able to do it with me having a felony, that's how I'm like, so I don't actually own the medical part. I'm just a management services company, right? Um, so yeah, I guess I told you all of that just to tell you this. Like, so now this has become, oh yeah, while I was in prison, I actually wrote the business plan with one of these billionaire business geniuses. He helped me write the business plan. Like, we just sat there. I was actually in during COVID, and during COVID, we got locked into these rooms and we're just sitting there. I mean, like where I was, it wasn't cells because it's a camp, right? So there's not actually cells with bars. It's like it's just these big open dorms, and there's actually no fences. Well, there can be fences, but the doors are open. Like, you could leave if you want, but yeah, you don't, because then they're gonna bump you up in security and give you more time. So the camps are different than what you see in the movies, but we were locked into these dormitories during COVID, so we had nothing to do. And um this friend that I made in there, that's a billionaire, we just sat there and wrote this business plan over like a year. And we actually researched it every day and then wrote it. And then when I got out, I just executed he actually had more time than me. So when I got out, I just executed the business plan. And so I tell you all this to tell you, yeah, this becomes a story of redemption, right?
Yeah.
I saw how much I was able to help people. And now it's about helping people in the same way, but doing it in a safe, legitimate, with a big eye on long-term health. So I'm huge on harm reduction. Let's do this the right way. Obviously I've looked at uh, a myriad, almost a countless amount of blood work over the time, and I understand it all. And I know how to do this the right way. So it's about long-term health, helping people, long-term health, and safety, health and safety as a primary mindset.
Yeah. That's amazing. And what I wanted to ask you a couple questions, just because you've seen so many cases. I'm always really curious. What are a few of the biggest like myths or aversions to TRT you hear from new patients?
So, so ironically, like I in the beginning, like I really like had this disparaging idea of the medical community, and I like it makes you, when you really look at it, it makes you mad. Um, I try not to disparage them anymore, more so because I don't need like doctors and actual people in the medical community coming after me and and saying that and I don't know, I just don't need any enemies. So trying not to disparage the medical community too much. Um, that you do testosterone took a path to demonization probably around the 80s, right? Especially during the war on drugs, it got lumped in with all the harder drugs. Testosterone is the only controlled substance that's naturally found in your body. It does not work under the same mechanisms as other drugs, which, as I said before, they directly mimic these neurotransmitters. Testosterone does not. It's just a natural chemical that's found in your body. So it just doesn't belong controlled like the rest of like heroin and cocaine and whatever the rest of the drugs. But at the time, the political parties were running on the platform of war on drugs, and they were just controlling everything that looked like a drug. And so they controlled testosterone, which made it difficult, if not impossible, to research. Plus, at this time in the late 80s, it got banned from the Olympic Committee, banned from all professional sports, and it became a controlled substance in the 1990 Steroid Control Act. So everybody just started stigmatizing it, and it just got this stigma attached to it. It took a path similar to marijuana. If we look at marijuana is a Schedule 1 controlled substance, like the same level as heroin, like indicating that and indicating that it has no medicinal value and has no even researchable value. Like so back in the 50s, there was something called reefer madness, where they actually used to educate people and teach people that marijuana was dangerous. It was deadly. If you smoked it, you would go crazy and you would die. They actually used to inculcate people with this information. And that's why everybody became so scared of it. And it had this huge stigma attached to it. And that's why the stigma is what caused them to make it a Schedule 1 controlled substance. It took us, after the 50s, it took us 60 years for people finally to go, you know what, marijuana isn't that dangerous. In fact, it has a lot of medicinal value. So states by themselves, independent of the federal government, started making it legal, right? Testosterone took a similar stigmatization. Just a few very poorly run studies decades ago made the and because it became controlled, now you can't research it or do studies on humans, right? So it just was this coalition of different events that just made it incredibly stigmatized and misunderstood. So the medical community, they're taught this. They're taught that they're not taught about it. They don't learn about it in medical school. We have several physicians that are our patients, and they all admit they don't learn anything about this in medical school, even endocrinologists, which is kind of insidious because you would think when you go to your endocrinologist, they're going to understand one of your main endocrine hormones, but they do not. They just don't learn anything about it. And the little information they did learn was that from a couple very poorly run studies that have now been retracted, and the original authors have actually like retracted a lot of the studies. You don't read about the retractions, just the original study. They think that it causes cardiovascular issues. They think that it causes prostate cancer. They think that it causes blood clotting, which we now know none of those are true. Not only, and ironically, it's exactly the opposite of what the medical community thought. Not only is testosterone does not cause cardiovascular issues, it is cardioprotective. What definitively causes cardiac risk is low testosterone, and there's no question about that. Again, the same thing with prostate cancer. Testosterone does not cause prostate cancer. In fact, some of the prostate cancers, one of the causes of it comes from actually low testosterone. We've evolved mechanisms to deal with low hormones, and one of those mechanisms is the actual mutation of the androgen receptors to be more sensitive for the low amount of androgens. And if you have low androgens, your androgen receptors will actually mutate. And this happens in the prostate as well as throughout the body. This mutation can cause prostate cancer. So low testosterone, definitively, just Google it. Does low testosterone cause prostate cancer? Tons of information will come up and say, yes, in fact, it does.
Interesting.
So testosterone is actually suppressive to prostate cancer. Now, when you have prostate cancer, there are some cases where it can feed the prostate cancer, but it's actually suppressive to you contracting prostate cancer. So again, it's exactly the opposite. Also, testosterone does not cause blood clots. It increases red blood cells. It causes what's called erythrocytosis, which is the increase of red blood cells, but not your clotting factors. Platelets, thrombin, prothrombin all stay the same. Your red blood cells increase, which is good because it's actually the oxygen. Red blood cells are what hold oxygen. It gets our whole biochemical reactions are able to promulgate off of all the oxygen that we have. Now, there is a point when your hematocrit and hemoglobin get too high, and that can cause symptoms of hypertension, but it's still not a clotting risk. So again, all of these things, this is what's inculcated into the providers, right? They're taught testosterone is dangerous, don't use it. And consequently, a bunch of however much that the system wants to indicate that studies are unbiased, nothing could be further from the truth. They're biased. They have a goal in mind of the person who's running the study. And a lot of these people ran these studies with the biased intention of finding that testosterone and anabolic steroids were bad.
Yeah.
And we now, but the more contemporary studies and contemporary knowledge is showing, especially that Finnish study that came out in 2022, it showed that, and it was thousands of people, or over 1,000 people anyway, showed that people on TRT had lower all-cause mortality, which means that people on TRT live longer.
Wow.
And not only did it not increase the risk of cardiac or prostate cancer, but people actually live longer on TRT. Wow. So all this stuff is now coming out, and it's something that I could have told just because I've seen it. So like what my experience has done, right, is it's allowed me to aggregate all this data. Like what I did every day was like I did all of the communications with people, right? And I hired people to do the shipping. I had like 5 shippers at one time, and I had like 4 chemists at one time, 4 or 5 chemists. and they did all the making and shipping of the products, and I dealt with the people, right? So, and I had people every single day, probably actually 100 or more. I probably dealt with 500 emails a day. um, Probably half of them were all asking for guidance, and they would show me blood work. They would ask me how, but I got all the empirical data. They would get back to me. How did this work? When you did this, this is how I felt. And this is, so I just aggregated so much empirical data. I must have had 20,000 clients. I aggregated more empirical data than any provider, physician, endocrinologist, urologist, just about anybody else in the entire country could have, unless they had my history. Right. So that's the benefit. That's what benefited me from all this prior experience, is that I've seen this on such a vast level, more than anyone else in the country, and I've seen how all these compounds affect people. So I can just see things. I can stand on my mountaintop and look down on all the empirical data I've aggregated over the decades, and I can just see things that other people can't. I can see patterns. I can see the way things work. So that's what really set me up to be very successful um, in a TRT company now.
Yeah, that's super interesting. It makes a ton of sense. And this is something I find really interesting because when I started, we talked about it on the last episode, but when I started TRT, I had huge problems with estrogen control, and a lot of it was, uh, a really poor um, initial dosing from the doctor. But what are some of the most common issues that come up with patients? It can be like fears or side effects or blood work or even logistics, like, how do I
Yeah.
do my shots and stuff like that. What are some of the first things that come up with new patients, and then how you troubleshoot them?
Yeah. So that's a good question. Sorry, I did go on a diatribe again, but yeah, the initial question was, what do I see? And so one of the things, the fears that I see is just the misinformation that's out there. So
Yeah.
people come to me and they think that they're going to have all these problems, um like if you go on the Reddit, the forums, right, the TRT forums, you're going to see all the TRT forums are help forums, right? They're people where people go who have problems, right? They're places for people with problems. So it aggregates a subset of the population who has problems. So if you go to one of those forums and you read like, oh my gosh, everybody here is having a problem, you're going to think that TRT is like laden with problems and people are having all these side effects. When in fact, here's the real numbers. 90% of the people immediately dramatically improve their quality of life, and they're off and running with no side effects. Right? It's only a very small percentage of the people who actually have side effects, whether that be um, estrogenic side effects or some, or which is the most common. But again, it's only like 10% of the people. Most men tolerate estrogen just fine. Um, so I would say like that's one of the most misunderstood things, is that 90% of the people immediately dramatically improve their quality of life. And it comes down to, just like you said, the way that people ran protocols in the past. One of the things you can't do with this is run a cookie cutter solution. It's not about just, here's the protocol that we give everybody, here you take it, right? There's a massive disparity between the way each individual reacts to different compounds, different blood levels, different dosings, different everything. So it's about developing a methodology to figure out what yields the best results for each individual, right? And we do that by just starting off with a small dose and keeping it simple. I don't want to add complicating factors. Let's just keep it simple to start with. And then we slowly titrate up until all your symptoms of hypogonadism are resolved. And we can slowly start adding things to see, depending on your goals and how you react to the initial treatment. It's all about making adjustments to see how, depending on how you react to initial treatment. And that's where I've been very successful. I don't really get people with too many side effects. And if I do, estrogenic side effects are not complicated for me to deal with. I really understand it. I understand how it works. Anybody who's really good at this, like, a lot of these side effects are not complicated to deal with. And
Yeah.
again, it has to deal with the methodology, that methodology that I described.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. And I wish I had come to you when I started TRT. Where do you see hormone replacement in the US going? Like on the one hand, we have, increased regulation, scrutiny, and lots of shady practices from bad clinics. On the other hand, we see some evidence of like increased democratization of drugs. And I personally think inevitably it has to ultimately go that way. But
Mhm.
I guess, how do you see it evolving over the next
Yeah,
decade or so?
that's a great question too. So when the DEA was going to instill some new regulations outside of the COVID era, remember, I think this was last year sometime. They were going to instill some telemedicine regulations that was going to make it harder for people to get their treatments, right? And again, this probably wasn't directed towards testosterone. It was probably directed more towards opiates and things like the Adderall, or the amphetamines. But testosterone is a controlled substance, so it kind of got lumped in with the rest of the controlled substances. And so the DEA has what they call a federal register, where they allow everybody to comment on an intended rule that they're going to impose, right? So all of us social media guys got together and we put out, here, go comment on this. Here's what you comment. Here's the federal register link. Go comment on it. They're going to take away our testosterone, this and that.
Yeah.
And they got the biggest response they've ever had in the history of this, like over 50,000 comments.
Yeah, I
And it
commented.
caused them to have to, they had to detract from actually imposing the rule. And they said, okay, well, we got to do something else, because obviously the people don't want this. So because of that, I don't see them making testosterone specifically um harder to get. Right? I don't like, I mean, it would be pretty easy for them just to define the class of drugs that they wanted, whether it be opiates or amphetamines. And then you can define something different for hormone replacement therapy. It's not hard to do that. So I don't know why they didn't try to do that in the first place. But like, I don't see it getting worse, because the people have already spoken, and if they try, then the people are going to get together again, and I'm certainly going to um, lead a big of a mass of people as we can, right to the Congress people and right to the DEA to get them to make our TRT accessible to us. And just like you're saying, the medical community, just the way things have laid out, right, is they have failed to adequately address the hormone deficiency problem. Right, hormone deficiency is a pervasive problem. Most people are actually hormone deficient. Most people are not optimal, and I can see it. You can probably see it too when you go out and walk around, and you can see people. You go, that guy could use some testosterone, especially aging populations. Like, and testosterone is like, the providers just see it as not an option, right? So you see all these people who, especially aging populations, who would benefit from testosterone, and they're just not having it provided to them. And if they're not going to give it to the aging, it's just so widely misunderstood that they have failed to adequately address how much testosterone can help, and how much hormone replacement therapy, not just testosterone, hormone replacement therapy for men and women,
Yeah.
can help. So just like you just said, it almost has to go in that direction. It has to go in a direction of, you have to deregulate this, because the medical community is not adequately addressing it. So therefore, the next answer is to deregulate it, so that people can take their health into their own hands. And I think that's going to be necessary. And one of the things that I'm certainly going to do, and I've already started to plan, is to lead a charge to deregulate testosterone, deregulate a lot of these hormones. Um, we can deschedule them, right? Take them out of the schedule, and Congress can do that for us. And so part of the plan is to get, probably Rick Collins makes sense, right? Get him to an account for us in escrow, and then we can create like a little nonprofit to aggregate some donations from people. My company's certainly going to donate, but we can get a fund to get lobby groups, and then just start a real charge and a real push, politically, to Congress to actually to change some of these laws. And that's that's going to be something that I'm going to take passionately, and that we're going to help lead a charge. We'll get all the influencers together. We'll have all these people able to donate to the nonprofits so that we can fund the lobby groups, so that we can fund all this. Again, my company's we're going to donate a certain amount of money per patient that we get to this fund. And I think we can all, if we all get together, we could be very powerful, and we can make this happen. We just all have to stick together. We have to get everybody to do it.
Yeah, I'm optimistic about the future.
Mhm.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on again and sharing your story.
Yeah.
It's been fascinating, and I really love some of the aspects of psychology that you spoke about and some of the more nuanced takes.
Yeah,
I think
thank
is
you very
really
much.
important. And yeah, if folks want to work with you and want to become a patient or get in touch with you, where's the best place for them to reach out?
Yeah, so hormonesforme.com. If you come there, we have plenty of ways to get a hold of us. Also our YouTube channel. I think we could put that in the description.
Yep,
We have
I
a
will.
lot of education and a lot of very good information that isn't, this debunking misinformation, and making people aware of things that maybe aren't talked about so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great resource. Well, thanks again, Ryan, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for everything you do as well, Scott.